Hello and welcome to CinemaSlices, where we look at some of the most excellent moments from cinema history and do a little deep dive on just why they're so good. So join us this week for a slice of Harold and Maude and a little exploration of how movies can do something special.
I'm your host, Mr. W, and I want to talk to you about how amazing films are.
Harold and Maude is a 1971 film directed by new Hollywood hippie Hal Ashby and bankrolled by Paramount, then under the auspices of the legendary Playboy producer Robert Evans. You might know him, he looked a little bit like this. And he had a couple of minor hits in and around that period. You might have heard of some of them, there was a couple of big ones, and one or two, there was a crime film and stuff. Well, you know what, never mind. Harold and Maude is the sort of film that a studio would only make when they were desperately trying to get hold of some of that hot countercultural coin that was knocking around in the late 60s, early 70s. But the meeting of massive Hollywood studio and counterculture hadn't been a huge success up to this point. People had stopped being interested in the likes of Hello Dolly, and they did want something a bit more off the beaten track. So Robert Evans hiring a guy like Hal Ashby, remember what that guy looks like, a countercultural college dropout, who also happened to have editing and directing experience, well, it all made sense. The film itself tells a story of 18-year-old Harold, played by Bud Cort, a bored, wealthy heir who repeatedly pretends to kill himself whenever his mother brings home a potentially suitable woman. And Maude, played by Ruth Gordon, a joyous bundle of energy at the ripe old age of 79 who lives to break the rules. They fall in love. Yeah, you heard. And that's it. The film does a lot of excellent work to make you buy into that relationship though, and that's great, but that's not why we're here. We're looking at a moment that goes to explain so much about the character of Maude. Throughout the whole film, Maude, she's 79 remember, seems to be embracing life at every turn. There's no cares or worries, she lives a life of abandon, she does things for fun and for the hell of it, and it's great. And all this time, the stiffly awkward Harold is totally besotted with her. But the real magic occurs at one point toward the end of the best day in their relationship. They end up sitting, looking over the Emeryville mudflats, surrounded by hippie driftwood art, just contemplating how much they've grown on each other. And, well, here's that moment.
Maude, I had the most wonderful day today. And you're very beautiful.
Oh, Harold. You make me feel like a schoolgirl.
Shall I come and visit you tomorrow? Oh, I can't. I have a luncheon date with a girl.
Oh.
Well, I don't even know her. My mother arranged it.
Dreyfus once wrote from Devil's Island that he would see the most glorious birds. Many years later in Brittany, he realized they had only been seagulls.
What happens here? Something great. After all this time of finding this kooky older lady so enjoyable to watch, from her penchant for attending the funerals of strangers, a fancy for some sweet Mary Jane, or maybe even some light car theft and living every day to the fullest, we finally get an explanation. The tattooed number on Maude's arm tells us, briefly and succinctly, that she was a concentration camp inmate, most likely at Auschwitz, where the practice of tattooing arms was most widely used. And suddenly, gently, for both Harold and the audience, we understand. We understand that Maude has made a singular response to the most traumatic of circumstances. She has visited hell on earth, and her reaction is to embrace life and all it has to offer, and we get to share a moment of that with her. The realization creeps over Harold too. He understands from this point on. This teenage boy so obsessed with death that he mimics it, he drives a fake hearse, he attends random funerals. From that moment on, he's changed. He's fallen in love with a woman who genuinely knows death and turned away from it to choose the light. And here, on a mud beach, at sunset, she passes that gift to Harold.
Harold loves Maude. And Maude loves Harold.
So how does Ashby do it? It's just a high-angle zoom of a duration of less than a second. Just enough to see, but not enough to fully register at that moment. So we see it, and we're positioned with Harold, as Maude is obviously too busy being enchanted by the seagulls. We can hazard a guess that it's probably Ashby's editorial instinct. He was already an Oscar winner at this point for his work on In the Heat of the Night, and that made him confident enough to do this. It's a quick edit in a film that doesn't have very many quick cuts at all. We see the tattoo, it half registers in our mind, and then we get a fine example of that most glorious shot, the cinema sunset. All Ashby has done is plant the seed, and if it takes hold, the audience is given a window into another layer of story from less than 1 second of one shot. And the greatest thing? It's never mentioned again. It's a brief, perfect insight of character, folded neatly into a scene where two people have found a connection. Later in the film, Harold manages to find a slightly more age-appropriate companion for his mischief, and Maude, well, we'll keep it spoiler limited here. Hal Ashby went on to direct a few more idiosyncratic works in the New Hollywood era. And Harold and Maude slowly developed a dedicated cult following. This moment, in this film, of two characters managing to briefly float next to each other among a not insignificant amount of driftwood art, is a quiet and small part of why we love the film, and we hope you do too. If you like that video, do that like and subscribe thing that people do, and ring the bell too. Apparently that helps. I don't know so much. I'm slightly too old for this, and my knees ache. Sometimes they sound like start pistons when they stand up, and that sets off my sciatica. And in turn, I get this bad pain, especially.
Whoa, sorry, just quickly wanted to say that this video was narrated and written by me, Mr. W, but it was animated, edited, and realised by my former student, who is way more talented than I'll ever be, Charlie Travers. You can get in contact with either of us in the details below in the description. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.